We're moving on to 2.4, multiplying rational numbers. So we've already talked about multiplying regular numbers or integers. Now we're going to talk about rational numbers, which means adding in fractions and decimals. Without multiplying, I just want to know whether the value of the expression is going to be positive or negative, and then I want you to explain why. Looking at problem A, how many negative numbers do I have there? Two. So who can help me to understand whether this should be positive or negative? Joseph, what do you think?
Positive.
Positive. Can anyone explain to me why this should be positive? Riley, what do you think?
Because if it's an even...
That is correct. Excellent job, okay? If you ever have an even amount, or if you have two negative signs, it's going to equal a positive answer. Let's look at problem B. 1/3 times negative 2/4. Class, will this be a negative or a positive answer?
Negative.
A negative. Can someone raise their hand and explain to me why we know that this will be a negative answer? Maddie, what do you think?
Because there's a negative.
That is correct. If we ever have an odd number of negative signs, then we know that that's going to equal a negative answer. All right, so these are some rules that we're going to want to know today when we are multiplying fractions, okay? You do not need a common denominator when multiplying or dividing fractions. So, remind me, do I need a common denominator when I multiply fractions?
No.
No, you do not, okay? Next up, you are never allowed to multiply mixed numbers. What does it tell you in blue you have to do to them first? You must make them improper first. Once you've turned it into an improper fraction, then you can move on. Read me the last and final thing on our screen today. If it starts as a mixed number, the final answer must be a mixed number, okay? So just remember, if it starts as a mixed number, make sure you end as a mixed number. So now we're going to do a few problems using those rules that we've just talked about. Find the product and write the fractions in simplest form. So when I'm doing this, guys, do I need to find a common denominator first?
No. Yes. No.
Everybody, read me what you just said there on the first star. Read it to me. You do not need to find a common denominator. Okay, so the answer is no. All I'm going to do now is just multiply across on the numerator and then multiply across on the denominator. So just the girls, what's 1 times 3?
3.
3. And then, now what I'm going to do, since I just multiplied the numerator, I have to multiply the two denominators together. What's 5 times 8? 40. Can 3/40 be simplified or reduced at all?
No.
No, there is nothing that goes into a 3 that also goes into a 40, so my correct answer is 3/40. If you ask me, multiplying fractions is actually easier than adding and subtracting because I don't have to get a common denominator. You just multiply across like normal, okay? Let's go on to the next one. Connor, what do I have to do to problem B before I can do anything else?
There's 2 negatives, so...
That is correct. I have to turn that mixed number into an improper fraction. So let's just drop down our negative 1/3. And what would negative 2 and 3/4 be as an improper fraction? Okay, remember it's a negative, so we've got negative 11 over 4. All right, now why do I have those parentheses there? You are multiplying. Anytime you have parentheses there, it means you're going to multiply. Have you guys heard of cross-reducing before?
Yeah.
Okay, so you try to figure out, is there anything that goes into a 3 that can also go into an 11? No, there is not. What about a 1 and a 4? No, because 1's as small as it can get. So there's really no cross-reducing we can do. The first thing that I want you to do is figure out, what will my sign be? If I am multiplying two negative numbers, my answer has to be positive. Good job. So now let's just work with the numerator. 1 times 11? 11. And 3 times 4? 12. Once again, our answer is going to be positive because we know it was two negatives multiplied together. Since the number 2 is even, my answer has to be positive. Okay, so that's how you would multiply fractions. Next up, let's multiply some decimals. Negative 2.5 times 3.6. Will my answer be positive or negative? We know it's going to be negative. How come? There's only one negative number, okay? So for this, I do not have to line up my decimal points. It just happens that they are lined up because they both have the same number of digits. So how many times over did I move my decimal point here? Okay, if it was here, I only had to move it one time. So just to show me that you understand that, that means we moved it one time. How many times did we move that decimal point over from the right side? Only one time. Let's add those together. What's 1 plus 1? 2. So this is how you know I'm going to be multiplying my decimal point. I'm moving it 2 times. Let's do this together. 5 times 6? 30. 2 times 6? Plus 3? 15. I put 0 as a placeholder. 5 times 3? 15. 2 times 3? Plus 1. What do I have to do to those two numbers? Let's add them together. What do you get when you add them together? Okay, 900. Am I done? I got to put my decimal in. So if my decimal starts right here, how many times am I moving it over? 2 times. So what's my answer? 9. Thank you for not saying 9.00 because those last zeros just kind of float away and go away. Remind me again, is my answer supposed to be negative or positive? Negative. So my correct answer is? Negative 9 is correct. Moving on to problem D. Same idea here. Do I have one negative number or 2?
1.
I only have 1. So what will my answer be? Positive or negative? Negative. Let's go ahead once again. 5.1 times 1.8. Who wants to do it for me? Riley, go ahead.
1 times 8 is 8, and then 8 times 5 is 40.
Good job.
And then 0, and then 1 and 5. And we add together, and then we'll get 918.
Okay. And then we remember this moved over 1 decimal point, that moved over 1 decimal point, which is 2 total. So let's go ahead and move it over 2 times. What do you get? Okay, 9.18. And once again, we knew since over here there was only one negative number, our answer has to be negative. So the correct answer is negative 9.18. Great job. Next up, this says to use number properties or shortcuts to multiply. Do you guys remember the commutative property? The commutative property told us, remember we talked about commuting in a car? In a car, you're moving around from one place to another. So the commutative property says I am allowed to move numbers from one place to another in my problem, okay? I want to teach you an idea real quick called a reciprocal. Everyone say reciprocal? All right, so a reciprocal, you don't have to write this down, but I'm going to teach it to you real quick. A reciprocal basically means you have to flip something. So if I was to flip the 3 and the 4, what would it say? 4/3, okay? So I just flipped those two numbers. If I was going to get a reciprocal or flip 2 over 5, what would it become? 5/2, okay? Now let's talk about if I was to flip 1/6. What would that be? 6/1, which means 6, okay? So that's kind of how a reciprocal will work. Let's look right here. There is one number in this problem A that looks different than the other ones. Aubrey, which one looks different than the other ones? -7. How can I make that look like a fraction?
7, 1.
Okay, put it over 1. Now what I want you guys to do is look at all of those fractions and see if you see a reciprocal or something that has been flipped from the numerator to the denominator. Raise your hand if you see which one has been flipped. Olivia, which one was it? Okay, very good. So what I have first, I'm going to drop down the -1/7, and which one is similar to that -1/7, Olivia? -7/1. So I'm going to go ahead and put -7/1. Now remember, this property simply tells me I am just moving this over here. I'm allowed to move things around according to my commutative property. So now we're just going to bring everything else down. I haven't done anything with that one yet, so we're going to times 4/5. And I haven't done anything with this one yet, so we're also going to continue to bring down times -1/2. So the first thing that I want to deal with is kind of working from left to right. This helps me out right here, and there is a way that I can simplify that or kind of get rid of something. Do you guys know what it means to cross-reduce? Okay. What is it here, if I'm looking at numbers, is there a number that can go into a 7 and a -7?
1.
A 1, but what else other bigger than a 1?
2.
A 7, okay? How many times can a 7 go into this 7? 1 time, so I'm going to change that to a 1. How many times can a 7 go into a -7? -1, okay, because I got to keep that negative there. And then obviously these are already 1 and 1. So let's look at this real quick. If I have a negative here and a negative here, when I multiply two negative numbers together, my answer is going to be positive, okay? So let's see if we can figure this out. What is negative 1 over 1 times negative 1 over 1? Just plain old positive 1. And basically what you've done here is you can just get rid of that right there. Now everything else we're going to drop it down. So bring down times 4/5 and times negative 1/2. Looking at this next section right here, is there anything that I can cross reduce in that part? The 2 and the 4. The 4 will become a 2 and the 2 will become a 1. Okay, now is there anything I can cross reduce this way?
No.
Nope. So now we're just going to go ahead. Let's drop down this multiplying by the number 1 times, and then now we're just going to multiply across. Do I need to find a common denominator?
No.
Nope. So what is 2 times 1?
2.
2 over, what's 5 times 1? 5. Now, was that going to be a negative or a positive? See that negative sign right there? So I have to keep the negative with it because there was only one negative. What is 1 times negative 2/5? It is negative 2/5. And that is your final answer. Okay, so we were able to do that simply by just kind of moving a few numbers around. Let's go on to problem B. Is there anything you can see there that I should use the commutative property to move my fractions or my numbers around? Connor?
2/3 and 3 halves.
Okay, very good. So we're going to have negative 2/3. I'll just drop down that first one. And now what I'm basically going to do is I'm going to move those two around. So I'll multiply times 3 halves and then just bring down times 7 and 7/8. Who would like to do this first part with me to see if there's anything that I can cross reduce? Kaylee, what should I do? And they become what? Okay, good job. The 2 and 2 just become 1s. What about the 3 and 3? They also become 1s. Okay, so looking at this right here, is that answer going to be negative or positive? Negative, because there's only one negative sign right there. Okay, now, Kaylee, what is negative 1 over 1 times 1 over 1? Okay, negative 1. Now I simply need to bring down the last part of my problem times 7 and 7/8. Looking at these two right here, how many negative numbers do you see? 1. So is my answer going to be negative or positive? It has to be negative because there's only one negative. So what is negative 1 times 7 and 7/8? Negative 7 and 7/8. Great job. Okay, so we've got a modeling real life problem here. A school record for the 40-meter dash is 15.24 seconds. So we have an athlete that's running pretty fast, and this is the record that he has set for the entire school. Predict or guess what the school record will be after 15 years when the school record decreases by 0.06 seconds per year. So let's think this through. We've got an athlete, he's running around really, really fast, but in 15 years, it says that the record is going to decrease. Does that mean if it decreases, did the time get faster or slower?
Slower.
It's going to get faster because the record is going to decrease, which means his running is actually going to be faster than 15.24 seconds. So the first thing we want to do is talk through this to try to figure out a verbal model. There's one thing we're going to have to use. The first thing we will have to use is the current school record. All right, so it's going to be important to know what the record is at this point. Then what we're going to do, we're going to have to add something else together. What else do you think I might add to the current school record to figure out what my answer will be in 15 years? Yes, that's very good. Okay, so we're going to have to add together the number of years. Okay, so the next thing we'll do is add the number of years. Now there's one clue word that I want to teach you in here. This says, and Kaylee was just talking about, we're going to have to put something in there about what the yearly change is. This says per year. Do you guys think you might know what per means? Add, subtract, multiply, or divide?
Multiply.
Anytime you see the word per in there, it's not talking about a cat. It is talking about multiplying something together, okay? So we will have to multiply, I'm just going to put a little dot here, times what the yearly change is. So what we have come up with is a verbal model, words that help us to figure out how to find this problem. We're going to have to take the current school record and add the number of years times what the yearly change would be. So now it says substitution. Remember, this just means I'm going to substitute in numbers instead of the words that we have come up with so far. So Elena, what is the current school record that it's already told us for the 40-meter dash? Very good. 15.24 seconds. So all I'm going to do is plug that in, 15.24 seconds. I still have to bring down my plus sign, plus the number of years. Anais, how many years is it talking about here?
15.
15 is correct. Then I am going to multiply by the yearly change. Notice right here what it says. It decreases by 0.06 seconds. If I am decreasing, is that a positive or a negative? Negative. So I am going to be decreasing negative 0.06 seconds every year. So now we've come up with plugging in some numbers that are going to help us to find this. There's two things that I've got to do here. One is I have to add. The other is I have to do what? Multiply. According to PEMDAS, what comes first? Adding or multiplying? Multiplying. So let's go ahead and multiply this together right here. 15 times negative 0.06. Is my answer going to be positive or negative? Negative. It's going to be negative because there's only one negative. So just go ahead and go off to the side, and I want you to multiply out 15 times 0.06. All right, so a lot of people are kind of messing up on where to put the decimal point. Right here, I didn't move the decimal point at all, and this one I moved it over 2, which means you're going to have to move it over a total of 2 spots, okay? 5 times 6 is 30, 1 times 6 is 6, plus 3 is 9, and the next one's just going to be zeros, so I'm going to move it over how many places, guys? 2, okay? Now, I already know, as we said over here, our answer is going to be negative. So it's negative point what? 0.90 or just 0.9. Now I still have to bring down the rest of my problem. What am I going to bring down, guys? 15.24. And bring down what sign? Okay, if that's a plus right there, I've got to bring down my plus. Can anyone tell me why I might go ahead and put parentheses around this? What do you think, Kaylee? Very good. Because I've got 2 different signs here, I am adding a negative number. Who always wins, the positive or the negative? Negative. The negative does every time. Every time you're adding a negative number, it means you are subtracting. So I'm going to go ahead and drop down 15.24 minus 0.9. Whenever I'm adding and subtracting, do I need to line up my decimal points? Yes, you do. Okay, so I've got 15.24. Once again, just kind of find somewhere on your paper. Put the decimal point there, and then the 9 goes right underneath the 2. Do I need any placeholders? Yes, let's put a 0 right here. Okay, now I want you guys to do that subtraction problem on your own. As I walked around, most people did have the subtraction part correct, but here's what I want you to be careful of. A lot of people told me the answer was negative 14.34. Why was that? Remember, same sign, add and keep, different signs, subtract and take. Take the sign of the larger number, which was 15.24. Since that's a positive, then you want to go ahead and make sure it stays positive. Now, out of the whole class, there was only one person who gave me the absolute correct answer, 14.34 seconds, okay? Everybody else forgot except for Maddie. You may go ahead and grab a candy at the back. Don't forget, since it's a modeling real life, you want to always make sure that you put units attached to the modeling real life problems, okay? Excellent job today on that. This is your homework for tonight, so go ahead and write down tonight's homework.